My name is Mark Boone, and I am Assistant Professor of Philosophy at Foreman Christian College. This is a video abstract for my article, Taking God Seriously, but Not Too Seriously, The Divine Command Theory, and William James, the Moral Philosopher, and the Moral Life. This is an article about an essay by William James called The Moral Philosopher and the Moral Life. William James is the great American pragmatist philosopher, and this particular essay is his most direct and systematic engagement with the topic of ethics. Now, the specific topic is the place of divine command theory in that particular text by William James. Divine command theory is the theory that what is right depends on God. There are various different ways of formulating divine command theory, but generally speaking, the idea is simply that what is right because God has commanded it, or God has preferred it, or God has decreed it. Now, my friend Michael Cantrell wrote an article in which he argues that William James endorses a sort of divine command theory in his The Moral Philosopher and the Moral Life. So in my article, I say that Cantrell did a good job interpreting James, in that he takes God seriously where James takes God seriously, because the role of God in this moral philosophy of James is actually quite significant, and some scholars have neglected it. However, James takes God somewhat more seriously, Cantrell takes God somewhat more seriously in his interpretation of James than I think James, in fact, does. And so what I say in my article is that technically, if you define divine command theory in a certain way, there are moral obligations that divine command theory is true of. That is to say, some things that are right because God has commanded them. That is indeed the thesis of this particular essay by William James. However, this is not at all a typical divine command theory for various reasons I explain in my article, and it's not at all clear that it's a divine command theory worthy of the name divine command theory. To illustrate somewhat, without going into any detail on William James' text, the idea of a divine command theory should have God as a moral legislator for the universe. God should be writing the moral laws that we have to follow. But in James, you have something quite different. God is not a legislator. God is more like an executive. Using the same analogy more extensively, God is not writing the laws, the moral laws of the universe. God is receiving from the moral legislature, which consists, in fact, of every sentient being, a confused bundle of conflicting obligations, and God is ratifying the best ones he can. God is ratifying the most systematic, consistent set of all obligations given to him that he can, and he's vetoing the rest. This is not at all your typical divine command theory, and what I said may have sounded rather confusing. Frankly, it should, because the text, The Moral Philosopher and the Moral Life, does have a tendency to confuse the reader. For all that, it is a delightful text, and it's very interesting, and I can recommend my article strongly for those who are interested in understanding that particular text by William James, or those who are interested more generally in ethics from William James, or from even more generally, ethics from the pragmatist philosophers. I could recommend my article somewhat less enthusiastically for people interested in divine command theory. I must specify one thing. This article does not represent my own views of the relationship of God and morality. My own views are much more traditional, well within the boundaries of Christian orthodoxy, unlike James' views. I am much closer to St. Augustine, St. Thomas Aquinas, C.S. Lewis, and John Calvin, and other Christian theologians than I am to William James. But I do present my understanding of James simply as an explanation of this particular text, and it is useful for understanding that text, and it is interesting. The text by William James is The Moral Philosopher, the Moral Life, and it is fascinating. My article is available online at the website for William James Studies, the journal, wherein it was published in volume 10 of that journal. I believe the URL is journal.wjsociety.org. Alternatively, just search for William James Studies on Google and you should be able to find it. or find my academia.edu profile, Mark J. Boone, PhD at academia.edu. You should be able to find it from there. Thank you for watching this video abstract. And for those who go further to read my article, or better yet, The Will to Believe by William James, or The Moral Philosopher and the Moral Life by William James, or Cantrell's article, of course, which is available in the same edition of the same journal, I bid you happy reading.